Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 419, Lizard Wizard.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Upgrade your game night with a beautiful game topper from GameToppersLLC.com. They have toppers of wide variety of sizes to fit on your table space or an ottoman or any space that you would like to upgrade to actually play games on or to beautify. All games that I've ever played are far more enjoyable on a game topper.
The mats help set the mood. If you're like, wow, this game is going to be amazing, there's a lava mat, there's the Cthulhu mat, all these different types of mats.
Forgot about the lava mat, and you had yours set up the other day.
I did.
That is also an awesome mat.
At SaltCon, we host quite a few events, and we have our toppers set up on the tables that we have reserved. When I'm not hosting one of the games, I typically am going to go play another game with some of our friends, which is not on the toppers, because we play on our toppers all the time. You don't realize how much they actually add to the games you play until you play a game that's not on one of the toppers.
Oh, I walked by Nathan and he set up a wingspan and he was playing it with some of the Hug Ladies and James. There was no space. You could literally reach across, play with Nathan's hair. I can't do that on a game top right now. I'm reaching across. I can't touch his face.
We're trying to sell
That's
these.
a good thing.
That's a perk with the small table. They have small toppers so that you can still touch the hair on Nathan's face.
See, a smaller game topper that I could reach over and slightly fondle Nathan's hair.
If you got the homes, you probably could do that still.
That's going to be a conundrum to figure out what's staying and what's going.
But we highly recommend GameToppersLLC.com. They have amazing stuff, super high quality products. Everything they have is just amazing. You will not be disappointed. Check them out, GameToppersLLC.com.
Everything they have is awesome.
Awesome.
Sorry.
Everything is awesome.
First try.
Is that all from the Lego movie? I've never seen it.
No,
Yes,
I did.
it actually is.
We are your hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Logan Howard.
And I am Andy Holiday.
While we're talking and introducing ourselves, take some time to wander on over to meeplenation.com. You can go to our website, check out our our cornucopia of blogs. There's blogs for every occasion in there almost now. You can also research and look at our Instagram photos, see some of our shots from SaltCon, from HugaMeepleCon, from ThursdayCon, from FridayCon, from every con.
That sounds like you guys play games a lot.
You know, sometimes I've been told I play too many games. I find that wrong.
Is con a new way of saying day?
It could be.
It should be.
Yeah, it should be. You can also find links to all of our past episodes, going way back to episode number 1, which is Coup, or back to last week's episode, which was Tiny Epic Dungeons. You can email us.
I loved that TED Talk.
You can email us if you have any questions, comments, or a game that you feel we should look into. You can reach us at meeplenation@gmail.com. We also have a link to our Patreon page on our website. We would love to have your support on our Patreon. If you like what we do and you want to support us, we would love to have that support. We appreciate all those who have supported us up to this point. We hope to continue to do this podcast at least until Logan is considered old.
And people are more than welcome to create their own Patreon requests of us instead of me just coming up with things on the fly and forcing us to do them.
For example, we now have a series of one sticker. I'm going to hold it up to the microphone so everybody can see it. It is a sticker of the meeples that represent us. So if you want one of those, reach out to our email and let us know. That's meeplenation@gmail.com.
This week we're talking about Lizard Wizard. Astoria is a land pulsing with magic and intrigue. A handful of archmages are vying for the loyalty of wizards across the land so they can wield ultimate power. Lizard Wizard is a game from the team that brought you Raccoon Tycoon. Some parts of the gameplay will be familiar to fans of Raccoon Tycoon and will add a bit of depth and strategy. In Lizard Wizard, players compete to recruit wizards from 7 unique schools of magic, build mystical towers, research powerful spells, summon helpful familiars, and search dark dungeons for gold and items of power. But only one archmage will rise above the rest and control the land. Will it be you?
This is a game that Andy got from Kickstarter not too long ago, and it is fantastic.
Yeah, it's one of the few Kickstarter games that we've got quite a few plays in, actually, which is rare for any game anymore. We play so many different games to actually play something. I think we've got 4 plays in, something like that. Play a game that many times, especially over such a short period of time, is actually pretty awesome.
And we get quite the plethora of people that show up for Friday nights nowadays to have a game that plays up to 6 like this. It's a little hard to explain, but after you do that, it's quite a simple game. Anybody can sit down and play it.
I even learned it.
And there you have it.
Looking at the basics of this and the description and being compared to Raccoon Tycoon and saying that it shared some things with Raccoon Tycoon, I remember when we first looked at the Kickstarter for Raccoon Tycoon and thinking to myself, big thumbs down, right? I was not super excited about it.
If your thumbs down, what's your pinky doing?
It's a fancy thumbs down.
It's a fancy thumbs down, yeah. I was not super excited about Raccoon Tycoon. After playing this game, I totally want to give Raccoon Tycoon a chance. Because this game, I think, was really, really solid. I've only been able to play one of the times, but I thought it was great. I've watched it played several times. It seems like a really good all-around game. The people who made this game, I would love to give them a chance on others.
So one of my favorite aspects of this game is actually the economy. The market, how they work that out, I think is just fantastic.
As wizards, you're gathering a bunch of reagents, essentially ingredients with which to cast your spells. You have a card that has several ingredients on it. When you play that card, one of your actions is to gather reagents. You play that card. You're going to gather 3 ingredients. Sometimes it's multiples of one type of ingredient. Sometimes they're all different. And then on the bottom half of the card,
sometimes you have to make a choice, right, Dave? Because they have, like, let's say 4 options on top, but you can only pick 3 of the 4.
Right. And then on the bottom half of the card, the second set of reagents that you're going to go over to the market board and you're going to increase the value of these reagents. Sometimes they're similar to the ones that you're gathering. Sometimes they're completely different, but you move those reagents up on this market board, which shows you how much they're worth. And then what you're talking about, Logan, is later as another action, you can convert the reagents to mana. Mana is essentially the currency in this game. For example, if I have 7 mandrake roots, and if the mandrake root is currently valued at 11 in the market, I can sell all of those mandrake roots for 11 each. But then after I sell it, the value goes down because of price and demand, right?
It goes down by the number of that particular reagent that you sold. So if you sold 4 mandrakes, then that's going to go down 4 spaces on the track. Like Logan said, this is such a great mechanic. I really like how it works.
I agree. I thought this was one of the best mechanics of the game. You have maybe a little bit of inner dilemma. If I claim these resources, I'm going to make it so that some other resource that I might not have, the value of that resource is going to go much higher, meaning that if I get that resource later, I don't benefit from having increased that market value. But at the same point, sometimes you can get those that will increase something else of yours, wanting to get it to that max, like that 12, like you said, Dave. Your next turn, as long as nobody else sells that mandrake root, you can make a lot of mana on that.
Or sometimes you need to sell it before it gets to that point, just because you need mana to do so much in the game. And you just need mana. You have to do it. You can't wait for it, that market to get up to where you really, really want it. You're kind of holding on to those resources, hoping to get the most bang for your buck. You just can't. You've got to get the mana, so you've got to sell, so you can continue the other actions that cost mana to perform.
Reagents you use for more than just mana. You use them to cast spells and to build wizard towers. But there's been a lot of times where I'm trying to gather a particular resource for either a spell or a tower, and I'm just like, wow, looking over at that market, that sulfur, I don't know if I can risk letting somebody else sell for 10 or 11 or 12 per sulfur, even if I only have like 3 or 4. That's such a huge boost money-wise. Sometimes it's really hard to turn away from that.
Even having a small amount, it can be worth it. Honestly, most of the time that's where I'm at. I'm usually selling 4. I don't typically hoard a bunch of the same type of resource just to sell. I have done that to complete one of the objectives. So there's 4 objectives in the game. They're different every game. There's a bunch of different objectives and they're random. When you meet that objective, you claim it, and you're the only player that can claim it for that turn. So it's kind of the first come, first serve.
No, you're the only player that can claim them, Andy.
That's right. And don't you forget it, Dave.
And that's the other side of it, is you're trying to gain a lot of resources to complete those goals, but you can only have a finite number of reagents anyway.
Yeah, for sure. That's the other thing, is you're trying to gather reagents to cast certain spells that you may have in your hand. Maybe you want to cast a spell that you gain in a specific turn when you choose to take a spell, which you can cast as soon as you gain it. However, you're limited to 10 at the beginning of the game. You can't have more than 10 reagents in your supply. Now, that can increase for each tower that you have claimed. And also there are spells that can increase your max number of reagents that you can have.
One thing I really like about this game is the variety of, not necessarily paths to victory, but the options that you can do. You can recruit the wizards, or you can increase your towers, or you can get a familiar and go to the dungeon. I had the ability to go to the dungeon without the familiar, which allowed me to go to the dungeon without claiming the familiar, which saved me a little bit of mana, because those familiars, especially towards the end of the game, start to get expensive.
With the familiar cards, there are actually 4 different things you can choose to do whenever you gain a familiar. And going to the dungeon is one of those. You can also, each familiar will be associated with a reagent. One of the actions you can do is you can take the reagents that are associated with that familiar and cast spells. And that's the only way you can cast more than one spell on your turn, by taking the familiar and taking that action. The other action you can do is you can do a research action, which allows you to clear all the spells that are face up, and you replenish those spells, and you get to take one for free. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get, but the spell you can take doesn't cost you any mana at all, so it can be pretty beneficial. The last thing you can do, you can take coins equal to the number of symbols. So each familiar, each tower, and each wizard is going to have a School of Magic symbol up in the corner.
So there's enchantment, there's conjuration, there's
Necromancy, yeah.
But there's 7 of them.
And when you gain the familiar of a particular School of Magic and you choose to do that ability, you're going to count all of the cards, and that includes spell cards. Spell cards also have a School of Magic on them. You count all your spell cards that you have played, that you have in your hand, and all of your wizards and towers and familiars that match that School of Magic, and you're going to gain 1 gold coin. There are gold coins in this, and that's different from mana. Each gold coin is going to be worth a point at the end of the game. That is also one of the other ways besides reagents that you can gain towers by spending the coins.
Towers are great because you can score points off of those if you use them in conjunction with the School of Magic with the wizards. You can also gain even more points if you have a spell that is also of the same School of Magic.
This is one of the things that I thought was really cool thematically. Every wizard that you have is going to score 1 point at the end of the game, at a minimum. Every tower that you have is going to score a point at a minimum. But if you can match, basically, if you can put a wizard into a tower, it's going to be 5 points for the pair. But if they have the same School of Magic...
So if you put an enchanting wizard in an enchanting tower...
then that set is worth 10.
That's an enchanting result.
Oh, that was really good, Logan.
But the thing that I think is really cool, like I said, thematically, it fits and it works really well to go along with that. When you get those spells are normally not worth anything. But when you have that enchanting tower with the enchanting wizard in that tower, he can cast as many enchantment spells as he wants. Each enchantment spell coming from that wizard and tower set is going to be worth 5 points. At first, I just kind of expected it to be this wizard and this tower could have 1 spell that would be worth those extra 5 points. It worked a lot better that it could be any number of them. A tower can hold 1 wizard, and that wizard can cast a bunch of spells.
Which just really makes it so you're fighting for certain cards that come up in the game. In particular, towers and wizards. When you recruit wizards, it's an auction. You start with the active player. That active player just starts the bidding at whatever they want to bid, and you're bidding mana. And then you just go around the table. Everybody has a chance to bid or pass. If you pass, then, like most auction games, you can't jump back into bidding. Once you have a clear winner, that person pays the mana, and they gain that wizard card.
The thing that I think is cool about that, too, is that on your turn, when you're the active player, you choose what action you're going to do. You can choose, I'm going to gather reagents, or I'm going to purchase a spell, or I want this wizard, so I want to put this wizard up for auction. And sometimes it's not because I want this wizard, it's because I want to get rid of this wizard so that another wizard will come in that's the actual School of Magic that I want. So as the active player, you say, I want to put this guy up for auction. It goes through that auction like you just explained. Say Logan wins the auction, it's still my turn, and I can put up another wizard for auction.
Or do something
Or
else.
do something totally different.
Yeah.
It's totally a strategy, too. If you notice that too many people have too much mana, you can drive up the bidding and then back out. Wizards are so valuable. People are at different points of the game are willing to pay all sorts of different prices for them. Totally worth it keeping everybody's cost. How much secret mana that they have. I bet you they have about this much, keeping that down as low as possible.
If you know that that's a particular wizard that someone definitely wants because they have a matching tower, you know that they really want it, they're going to fight for it, and you can probably drive that cost up a little bit.
Yeah, you see that eager bidding going on, then you're like, okay, feel safe about pushing up that bid of that wizard. Logan, you did that quite a bit in the last game that I played. You were bound and determined to not allow anybody to get a cheap wizard.
You guys are all jerks.
Well, you guys were willing to let him go for like 10 mana. Come on, guys. That's way too cheap. You guys got to keep this up.
I have learned next time I play with Logan, my bidding will start at 42.
That seemed to be his stopping point, yes.
No, that was everybody else's stopping point.
I guess that's true, yeah.
I get to 42 and he'd be like, well, I can't beat the answer to the universe, so I guess you can pay 42. Sometimes it feels like a lot of mana to pay for a wizard. Like Dave was saying, on his turn, he put it up. He doesn't really care about that lizard. He wants a different wizard up there. Puts it up for bid. I win it. It's almost like I got a free action. It's out of my turn. And then Dave has a whole nother choice of, do I really want this wizard or do I go for something else?
It was huge, especially if it's a wizard that you want and somebody else puts it up. In your example, if Dave's fishing for a different wizard and he puts up the wizard that you want, I mean, that's great because you're absolutely right. It's not on your turn. It's just like having a free action. In this game, those actions are somewhat limited sometimes. To be able to have that out-of-turn bid is great.
I think that's where a lot of the strategy comes in, at least as far as player interaction is with the bidding, the auction of wizards. I will say this, that playing in a higher count game, I noticed it can be fairly frustrating because the board changes so much.
Yes.
Certain cards will come up, like a tower card will come up that you really want, a familiar will come up that you really want, and you're like, oh my gosh, I really hope that lasts and gets around the table, and chances are there's no way it's going to. That 5-6 player game can be pretty rough as far as planning your turns out.
So if a wizard comes up on bid that you really want, go for it. With games like this, I don't pay too much attention. I'll make a cursory glance towards the spells, but I try not to let my heart get set on anything before it's even close to my turn. Typically, 2 players ahead of me is when I actually start to pay attention to the board more. Too far out, nothing's the same by the time it comes to your turn.
And it's impossible to get sulfur.
I felt the same way the last game I played, except for mine was Eye of Newt, and I had a spell that was going to be worth a ton of points if I could just get it cast. Gathered reagents like my last 3 turns, just to get new cards in my hand, to try to get that one resource I was missing, and I never could cast the spell because I couldn't get the resource.
Something else I just remembered about the wizards that's really helpful. Obviously, there's the School of Magic that we talked about, but each wizard has a resource on them as well. And so when you gather reagents, you're going to gather what's on the card, 3 of those, but then each wizard that you have, you're also going to gain the reagent that is on their card as well.
So if you have a variety of them, you go to gather reagents. Not only get quite a bit of reagents, but a variety. Looking at the card and what spells you have in your hand or what spells you want to buy. Wow, I can get really close to any spell I want if I just go one direction or the other, depending on the reagent card I use.
It's also a very effective way to get certain reagents. If you can get multiples of the same wizard, the reagents that they supply to you match objectives for the game, where you have to have 7 of them. Very effective way to get reagents by doing that. Those are worth 10 points each of those objectives. If you can get those, that is a lot of points. If you manage to get all 4 of them,
Shut up.
that's 40 points.
One of the other things you can do is spells. I think you've just alluded to is that spells, they have victory point criteria. If you have so much of one thing, they give you extra points. I had a spell at one point that gave me bonus points for having wizards and towers. If I had unique wizards and towers, they were worth so many points. That was worth quite a bit of victory points. Some help you when you go dive the dungeon. They have some increasing your inventory size, all sorts of.
You know, I'm always a sucker for technology, trees, spells, things like that in these kinds of games. I loved the spell pool. I loved how many different spells there were in this game. A lot of different ones with a lot of different things. Sometimes it was for scoring. Sometimes it was something totally different, but there was just a lot of variety.
One thing to note is that there are quite a few spells that take that element to it. that are more of attack spells. They have spells that defend against those attack spells. We played a couple games with those and decided we didn't like them.
I really didn't.
Yeah, Logan really didn't like them.
Thanks, young Logan. Looking at you.
But in the rule book, if you don't like those, there is a mechanic. They're marked clearly that you can just take all of those spells out and remove them from the game. A lot of people don't like that direct confrontation, especially when it's targeting one player. It's a little easier to swallow when it affects everyone, but when one person feels like they're getting picked on, there can be some negative feelings around the table. I honestly don't think those negative feelings are worth it. We took the cards out for the next 2 times that it got played. It was a much better experience for everyone.
I think it would be a better experience if people were playing that way the whole time.
Well, not only that, I found myself getting rid of spells just to get rid of the attack cards.
Oh, I did that first time that we played. One of those actions, again, when you get the familiar, is to clear the field. I'd see an attack spell on my turn and be like, ooh, I really don't want that attack spell to come after me. It's worth clearing the field, hoping something comes up, just to get rid of it.
I know a lot of people really like that, take that, and some people thrive on that I don't necessarily want those cards played against me, but the fact that you took an action on your turn to simply avoid that attack on you later, for me, personally, it detracts from the game where you're playing so defensively against a possible aggression. And it's not even a for sure aggression, it's just a possible aggression, but you have to make those steps to prevent that from happening. For me personally, that's not a mechanic I thrive on, I look forward to. In fact, it's usually a mechanic that I try to avoid. Sometimes you do the beating, sometimes you get the beating. We all know it's less fun to receive the beating than it is to give the beating.
The nice thing, Logan, like you were talking about, that action to clear the spells when you hire the familiar. When you do that, you still get to gain a spell. Clear all the spells, deal 4 new ones, and then you get to choose one. You don't know what you're going to get, but at least it's not a completely wasted action.
Exactly. And I think the last thing that we haven't talked about too much is the dungeon, the press your luck option of the game.
This was my favorite part of the game.
Because you rocked at it?
Put me solidly in 4th place.
That's not too bad.
How many people were playing, Nathan?
6.
Oh, okay. Dang. I was really hoping you were going to say 4.
I get that.
Dungeon, you take a familiar, and one of the actions is you delve into the dungeon looking for the gold. Gold are potential victory points at the end of the game. If you run into a monster, you're fine. If you gather treasure, some cards that they just collect so many gold coins, those are yours. If you run into one monster, have some treasure, it's your choice, continue going or just walking away. If you run into a second monster, you're done and you lose anything special. And so it can be a really awesome way to get points, or really terrible like Nathan did.
Dungeon gets progressively harder each time you visit. Every time someone goes to the dungeon, you're going to add a card from the Magic Forest, which is just a monster. It's just going to add another hit card that will affect you. Anybody goes to the dungeon, one of those cards gets added. People are pulling treasures out too. The ratio of treasure to monster cards gets worse and worse and worse as the game goes on.
Right, because we're pulling treasure cards out. The monster that you run into gets put back in, and you add a monster from the Enchanted Forest.
Correct.
Or Magic Forest.
Beginning of the game, this is definitely a pretty solid strategy to get coins early on. I think it becomes a weaker action as the game progresses.
I think so too, at least in my experience that I found as I was going in. And there are spells that will help protect you so you can avoid some of those monsters that you're drawing. Still, the points that I was getting delving into the dungeon, I'd get 3, 4, occasionally 5 points. But at that same point, I was avoiding draw a new spell, draw a new tower, draw a new wizard. Those combinations were a lot more than 5 points.
If you can get certain spell cards that not only let you avoid monsters, but actually give you a benefit when you run into certain monsters in the dungeon. If you can get several of those so that you're actually getting a benefit when creatures come out, not just, yeah, I can skip over that card, but they're going to give me something along with treasure that I get, then maybe. But you have to see those spell cards come out and be able to grab them.
It was still a tipping point because the first time we played, I definitely had that strategy where I had a lot of those. These monsters won't affect you. These ones will give you an additional gold coin if you encounter them. But at some point, there's still only so much treasure in there. And if you have the most treasure cards from the dungeon at the end of the game, you get an additional 10 points. But at the same time, even with those spells cast, there's still a tipping point that Nathan was talking about where it's no longer effective.
That's one of the things that I want to try. I'm really hoping the next time we play this, I'm going to be able to get some of those spells, then effectively do the dungeon throughout the game.
That is the only part of the game I have not done. I have not gone into the dungeon a single time.
Only time that I have, of course, I've only played it the one time, but the only time I didn't actually go into the dungeon. I bought a spell that was just draw the top 7 dungeon cards, keep any treasures that you find.
He has this other strategy where he goes for all 4 of the other mission tokens. They're worth 40 victory points, so he doesn't need to be bothered with getting the extra treasure tokens for 10.
Or really anything else.
You can play the game however you want, but it's not like Andy wins or anything.
It won when I played.
I haven't lost yet.
Oh.
I thought Porter won our first time.
No, I beat Porter too. One thing we haven't talked about yet is the artwork. I thought the artwork was amazing. The monsters were cool. My favorite monster card was the gelatinous cube. I thought that was such cool artwork on the gelatinous cube. The wizards are just cool looking too. The components in the game, retail version, obviously not near as amazing as the Kickstarter version, so I would definitely recommend getting the Kickstarter version if you can get a hold of it. You have a lot better components instead of cardboard. For your mana, you have metal coins for your gold coins. For your reagents, they're wood pieces with stickers instead of cardboard pieces. And the starting player is this huge wizard.
Having only played on the Kickstarter version, I liked it. I like the metal coins. Metal coins are always kind of fun, just the sound, the feel of metal coins. The art was great. Really enjoyed the art, especially on wizards. I thought the lizard wizards were very well lizardly and wizardly.
The art for me was not as big a deal as it is a lot of times. It was well done. It just wasn't the kind of art that would get me excited about a game. In fact, again, going back to Raccoon Tycoon, that it was by the same people, I was like, oh yeah, I can see the style of art is very similar, which was one of the things with Raccoon Tycoon that I didn't get excited about. But again, having played it and enjoyed it so much, opinion there has changed.
Is there anything you guys did not like about the game?
Andy Poops destroyed us.
Anything besides that?
That stupid spell.
The spell you got played on you?
It was so much victory points.
It was.
And it wasn't even that, oh, you're ahead, so I'm going to attack you. It's, well, you're ahead of me.
That's the time to use something like that.
I think for me, it goes up to 6 players. I don't think it's a 6-player game. Found it very difficult and frustrating to spy a wizard or a tower that I wanted and be sitting next to somebody else who also wanted it. I mean, you do run into that with every game.
That's Andy's curse, but he still beats me.
With 6 players, it just felt like there was too disconnected for me. There wasn't any real point of observing the game board status until it was the person before me's turn.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you there. It seems like it would be probably best with 3 or 4 players.
I agree. I think that would be a prime number for it.
I would agree with that, but then I think we would actually have to come back to and play the game with 6 people that are familiar with the game.
True.
And how quick it could come through back to your tape.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we had those same similar struggles with Firefly, the game, trying to teach new players with that many players. It was no good. If you had experienced players, 6 might do, but again, the same point is game status is so fluid that it doesn't really benefit me to track the game board till it's almost my turn.
Would be the same thing with like 2 or 3 players, because you can keep track of some things and hope that they're there. This game, so many things can change. You can get a familiar, you can clear the spell cards, you can buy that special tower that you've been keeping your eye on for 3 turns and then it's gone.
Right, but at the same point, fewer players, altering of the game board state is less. On a 6-player turn, everything could be different. Whereas you've got 3 players, there's only 3 things that are going to change. So there's still the option of some things being available. There's a chance that the thing I wanted is going to be gone 100%. However, if I have backups or I can evaluate, okay, if this goes, I can go after that. The chance for that game board state to change is greatly reduced with a lower player count.
Yeah, I agree with you. Even having experienced players wouldn't really have an effect on that. My only beef with it, besides legitimate problem, having the higher player count. Honestly, I talked about the components, but my one beef is with the components. That's with the mana coins. They're really hard to read.
Yes,
oh, that is true.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. They're nice and metal.
It's a dark blue color. It's a pretty blue color. I love the color, but they're really hard to read.
One of my biggest issues, something I didn't really notice until after having played it, when you go to sell reagents and you get your mana's secret. And this might also change with player count too. I don't really know. Most people around the table were announcing, okay, I'm selling, because there was a banker, I'm selling 6 of these. I need this much mana. I can keep track. Strategically, I can be building a strategy for when I want to put this guy up for auction. But if there's somebody who's not announcing it. They're just their turn. They're by the mana. They can just
They're the
make
banker.
they're the banker. They can make those changes without anybody knowing. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I can see that, especially in a game where there's an auction game.
That was kind of my bad because I was sitting next to the banker sometimes.
Right.
And so I would just be like, oh, I'm exchanging. And I'd throw my reagents. And especially with the game toppers, I can't reach across the table easily to
Right.
gently caress Dave's face or even turn in my reagents. Amara, will you do this? Okay, I need this. And then
Right.
everybody has a job of what they're sitting next to.
Right. And that's why I say I didn't even think about it during the game. Kept going, how does Logan have any money? Because everybody else, I'm keeping track when they're selling stuff. And I had no idea when you were selling stuff.
It's kind of like Dave sitting next to all the resources. Some
Right.
of them just happen to migrate into his pool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the 5 is missing its other buddy. And so, they have to go together.
Yeah, they have to go together. Yeah.
I like ending the game can go so many different ways. If any of the stacks run out and everything that's available on the board is gone, that's the end of the game.
Anything available of that stack that ran out. So wizard stack runs out, the 2 face-up wizards also have to be taken to trigger the end of the game, for an example.
The same thing with familiars, it's the same thing with spells. That game, whatever people have been going for the most, you almost have to pump the brakes of, ooh, is it really worth clearing the spells to get maybe a better choice?
Right.
Just end the game.
I find that as a good and bad. It can also be a good-
I know it's a
good
bad
thing.
for you. But I was telling Andy before we cast, I think I have myself set up at a good point, so I kind of have to just end it. Even if I don't win, it's better on my terms than it is on Andy fulfilling his 12th objective.
There's only 4.
Yeah, you have more.
Logan, I think he's right.
You think who's right?
Sorry, that was really unclear.
Logan, comma.
I think Logan is right.
So that is Lizard Wizard. I think we've all enjoyed playing this game. It's one of those Kickstarters that I wasn't sure whether I was going to like or not, and I am really glad I Kickstarted.
I'm glad somebody got it because I enjoyed it. Looking forward to playing it again.
Yeah, me too.
I'm glad we pulled it off the shelf.
Me too.
No, same. Until next time.
We'll see you going to the dungeon because that's the only place you can get 4th place points.
Well, if you're only going for 4th place points, that's why you lost.
That could be true. Maybe we should see you collecting those lizard wizards.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter @MeepleNation. We also have Instagram.
Under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and we have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Braiding Detergent for our music.
If you like what we do, we would love to feel your... Wow.
Wow, what would we like to feel? Bring it on home. Bring it on home. I want to feel your love and support. Feel your...
I don't know if that can make it to the end either. I might be pushing that envelope a little too far. Guess I didn't actually say feel anything.
I was gonna say you can have that in the bloopers still. I think that's clean enough.
No, all it has to say is we would love to feel, and then just cuts off. But into the bloopers.
Astoria is a land pulsing with magic and intrigue. Can I say intrigue?
No.
Dang it. And some parts of the game will be familiar to fans of... Sorry.
And towers are huge because you can use those towers in conjunction with... You can score points off those towers as long as you have conjunction with that same school of music.
Music?